It begins with the words, Ele Toldot Yitzchak. Now, I'm a rabbi, so I'm supposed to say that everything in the Torah has meaning. But really, these words are especially meaningful, even though they're very common in the Torah. The word Toldot comes from the root Yeled, which means child. It means child both in the sense of boy or Yeldah, girl, and it also means child in the sense of one's descendants. The word Toldot therefore carries both the meanings of progeny and also a story descended from a person, and even a history descended from a person. When our Torah portion begins, Ele Toldot Yitzchak, it means these are the descendants of Isaac, but also this is Isaac's story, or even this is Isaac's legacy. Following the death of my father last week, I've been thinking about what we leave behind after our physical time on earth ends. Our lives are ephemeral, and also so much of what we leave behind is temporary. I recall a late-night conversation I had with a close friend of mine who's a cantor. We were talking about what we want to do with our lives, and we came to the conclusion that if my cantor friend is wildly successful, the best possible professional impact he could have would be similar to that of Debbie Friedman, the 20th century Jewish music composer. Debbie Friedman has hugely influenced Jewish music and will be remembered for years. But still, we wondered, in 7 generations, how many people will know who Debbie Friedman was? It seems that our impact on those around us while we are alive really makes up our legacy. Rather than thinking we should find solace in what our loved ones leave behind, I've been thinking that we should find solace in the times we had with our loved ones when they were still with us. But I can think of an important exception to this. Belonging to the Jewish people endures and gives us lasting meaning beyond our deaths. Perhaps that is truly what makes Debbie Friedman's career so incredible. She inherited the Jewish tradition, made it her own, and passed it down for future generations, steering it in directions she thought it should go. My dad had a rich, full, and loving life, but I don't want to eulogize him now. Instead, I want us to think about how he fit into this dynamic of inheriting and passing down the Jewish tradition. Perhaps like many of us here tonight, my dad didn't really know what to make of God. While he wasn't an atheist per se, I think he would have said that if God exists, we can know very little about God. He didn't dismiss God in his life or in Judaism, but he didn't gravitate toward God either. And yet, it was incredibly important to my father that my sister and I be raised Jewish. He wanted to pass the Jewish tradition down to us. Judaism was certainly important to my father culturally. He grew up with his Yiddish-speaking grandparents, and he liked to study Jewish history. Still, my guess is that if I really had pressed him, he would have had trouble articulating exactly why he was so keen for my sister and me to be Jewish. Judaism for him, and for many of us, has a pull on us that's hard to put into words. We often say the words ledor vador, from generation to generation. In Jewish professional circles, I've even heard folks joke about creating dor vador moments. One of the most prominent places we see the phrase ledor vador appears in a prayer book in the Kedusha, part of the Amidah. It says, Ledor vador nagid godlecha, v'lenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed, ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata, baruch ata Adonai ha'el ha'kadosh, which means, to all generations we declare your greatness, and for all eternity proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O God, shall never depart from our lips. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. While many of us struggle to put our fingers on exactly what we mean by God, our prayer book and much of the Talmud, and I'd say even the Torah, is clear that our ongoing relationship with God is an important part of the Jewish Shalshelet HaKabbalah, the Jewish chain of tradition. But before this God scares many of us away, I would encourage us to think liberally about what God can mean in this circumstance. We can become aware of God's existence, some of us believe, when we stand in a place like Yosemite and become overtaken by awe. God can also mean the sum total of the entire universe. God to others means a mysterious connective tissue in everything that gives us meaning. To others, God is a force in the universe that cares for us and even steers history. And to still others, God is the connection we feel when we sit across from someone we love and look into their eyes. In fact, one of the most important tenets of Judaism is that our relationship with God remains debated and mysterious. We can never put our fingers exactly on what God is. Deciphering how to live in response to God is also a thorny issue. At the same time, being in relationship with God remains the iron core around which Judaism orbits. Rabbi Leo Beck, the chief rabbi of Berlin before and during the Holocaust, who survived the concentration camps, put it this way: through each of the many centuries, no matter how this or that person in the house of Israel acquitted themselves, despite every divergent way, including wrong ways and detours, the idea that Israel had to be a people before God continued to shine clearly. It is for this reason that the existence of the Jewish people has historical value. I think many of us contemporary Jews who are skeptical and even unsure of what God is still feel this numinous pull at the heart of Judaism. Many of us are unclear on what exactly the Jewish relationship to God could be, but we know it's important, and we want to offer it to the next generation. Passing down that tradition was part of my dad's toldot, part of his story, part of his legacy. Like so many of us, my dad did his part to preserve and mold Judaism as he passed it on. He cooked us matzah brai on Passover. He taught us Yiddish words and jokes. He was involved in the New Israel Fund and other Jewish organizations, and he made sure that my sister and I had a Jewish education. Many other parts of my life offered my dad a sense of meaning. He contributed to make life better for farm workers, miners, and other marginalized people. He loved his family. He had lasting friendships, and he enjoyed everything from fine wine to the Belgian comic books Tintin. Still, inheriting, making it his own, and passing down the Jewish tradition was a critical part of what gave my dad's life meaning. How remarkable to be part of a thread through history going back centuries that links folks with a common language, texts, practices, and grappling with something greater than ourselves. Ultimately, Judaism teaches us that God is not some abstract concept to debate intellectually. Instead, the Jewish wrestling with God demands that we live in response to something greater than ourselves. It reminds us that our existence asks us to participate in tikkun, in repairing the world, in trying to make it a better place. In his book on the meaning of Jewish existence, Rabbi Leo Beck, the rabbi who survived the Holocaust in Germany, writes about how Jews see our lives as commanding us to live in response to both the awe and the brokenness of the universe. Beck writes, "Everywhere and always, the Jewish people know themselves to be addressed and touched. Everywhere an answer is demanded from them. Everywhere the commandment reveals itself. I am so grateful that my father passed to me the Jewish way of being in the world. This way of being in the world teaches us to celebrate, to struggle, and to thrive, because of the gifts of our existence. May we all do our part to receive and transmit this beautiful thing we call Judaism. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.